Have you ever tried analyzing a malware sample and just felt buried underneath thousands of lines of code with no real idea where to start? Well, you're not alone. Most people start at the top and try to read every single line, but there's a much faster way. My name is Anuj Soni, and after 20 years reverse engineering malware and teaching thousands of analysts how to do it effectively, I want to show you the approach I actually use every day. In this video, we're analyzing real ransomware code without touching any assembly. And by the end, you'll understand, strangely, why this particular sample targets your printers. Let's get to it. So here on my desktop within my Windows 11 VM, I have this sample sys32.exe, and I've also already loaded it up here into the free version of Binary Ninja. And as always, if you want to follow along, check the description of this video for details on downloading the sample. Now, you might be wondering why we open the code at all. And the reality is, as helpful as other analysis techniques are, like running the sample in a sandbox to observe its behavior, they don't tell you the full story. Executing the sample typically shows you one potential path of execution, but code analysis can give you visibility into all potential paths of execution. Now, with this code loaded into Binary Ninja, we currently have the disassembly view up on the left-hand side and the decompiler view up on the right-hand side. The disassembly shows you the individual operations the CPU has to perform, but the problem is it can be overwhelming. And honestly, humans were never meant to read this. So you know what? We're actually going to go ahead and just close this window for now. Instead, we're going to focus on the decompiler view, which provides a C-like representation of the code. It isn't perfect, but it's pretty accurate, and it's far easier to read than assembly. When we load this program into Binary Ninja, it brings us to the main function, which is the beginning of user-defined code. And it might seem tempting to start analyzing this code from top to bottom, but I'm going to introduce you to a far better approach that I like to call pivot-first analysis. Rather than reading each line of code beginning to end, which is an overwhelming task even when using the decompiler output, we're going to pivot or jump to different areas of the code where interesting stuff might be happening. And the way we pivot follows a simple 5-step process, one you'll see me repeat throughout this video. Number 1 is triage. Number 2 is pick a pivot. Number 3 is cross-reference. Number 4 is interpret. And number 5 is document. Let me show you. So the first step in the pivot-first analysis method is triage, where we survey the sample to build a list of potential leads. To make that choice, we're going to use Binary Ninja's triage view. So I'm going to open that up here on the right-hand side by going to this pull-down and then choosing the triage summary. This is definitely my favorite view in Binary Ninja because it provides an amazing starting point for code analysis. The view contains a lot of great information to get a feel for the program and its potential capabilities. And we're going to focus in particular on 2 areas, which are, as I scroll down here, the imports, and then scrolling down some more, the strings. The imports, by the way, are basically the program's dependencies, and the strings are essentially the embedded strings within the file. So let me start with the strings because there are going to be quite a few interesting ones here. So if I make this window a little bit bigger so I can see the full view, and then again, just focusing here on these strings, there are quite a few that I could dig into. But as I scroll towards the bottom, you'll start to see some that, at least I think, are particularly interesting. So right here, these look like command line arguments associated with maybe some usage statements. And if that's true, this would mean the malware is likely operator controlled, which means a human runs it by hand with specific options. If I keep scrolling down here, I see other interesting strings here that could be error messages or just providing status information. And if I keep scrolling down, I see some other interesting strings like killing processes. So this could certainly allude to a capability worth knowing about for this sample. So let's actually dig into this one a little bit more. So as a reminder, the first step in pivot-first analysis is triage, which we just did in the triage view. The second step is to pick a pivot. I'm going to choose this string about killing processes and pivot on it. To do so, I'm simply going to single click on it, which I basically already did. And you see here on the left-hand side in the decompiler output, it's essentially showing me where, this is the address, of the actual string embedded in the file. The third step in pivot first analysis is to find cross references to this string or locations where the code actually uses it. So here on the left-hand side at the bottom, you'll see a window called cross references, which lists all of the references in the code to this particular string. And you can see that there is currently one reference listed that is in the actual code. So in order to actually jump to this location, I'm going to double click now here. And this now takes me, again, in the decompiler output to the location of the code that actually references the string. Now, on the right-hand side, you can see it also populated the disassembly. I'm just going to go ahead and close this for now since we're focused on the decompiler output that actually references this string right here, killing processes. Now, what we'll also notice is that this string is referenced within the main function, which again is the user-defined entry point. The next step in the pivot first analysis process is to interpret. So here we see calls to Windows APIs like create to help 32 snapshot, process 32 first, open process, terminate process, and if I scroll down a bit more, we see process 32 next. So all of these APIs collectively can be used to target a specific process for termination. Malware might want to terminate processes to enable access to certain files, to disable defenses, or even to evade detection. Now, if we took a deeper dive into this code right here, we'll see that it is happening in the context of a do-while loop. So you can see a do statement here. And then again, if I go down to the bottom, there is a while statement here. And it's actually iterating over values pointed to by this address right here. So if I go ahead and double click here, I'll see a number of processes listed here. These are actually names of processes that often hold files open or protect the victim's ability to actually recover from a ransomware attack. So killing these processes would clear the way for an unrecoverable encryption. So with that, we can now complete the final step of the process, which is to document. So let me go back here by hitting escape to my do while loop. I'll click on the do. I'll then type the semicolon key. And this is where I can now insert a comment. For example, loop to terminate processes that hinder encryption. And then I'll press comment. By the way, keeping your notes organized like this as you go is half the battle in a real investigation. So if you want the exact template I use to track observations while I analyze samples, it's linked to in the description. So without analyzing any assembly, we've gone from a wall of code to a documented observation, and we got there by pivoting on a single string. Let's do it again because the whole point of pivot first analysis is that it's basically a loop that you repeat. No pun intended regarding the do-while loop we just looked at. So this time I'm going to pick a different kind of lead. Let me go back to our triage view over here. And this time, let me scroll through the list of imports until I find something that is worth digging into. Now, as I scroll through these, I'm basically looking for anything that makes me stop and go, wait, why is that there? And if I continue doing that, here's a great one at the bottom that says enum printer. I also see one that says write printer. And then I see other APIs like start doc printer. As you can see, there's quite a few APIs here that all have the word printer in it. So these are obviously all printing APIs, and I want you to sit with how strange that is for a second. This is ransomware. I told you that up front. Why on earth does ransomware need to talk to your printers? So that surprise is what I'll pivot based on. If I click on write printer, on the left-hand side, it populates where in the import address table the write printer actually is. If I then click here on write printer, on the left-hand side, you'll see the cross references populate again. And there's only one reference underneath code references. And ultimately, what we are interested in digging into right now is the code. So I'll go ahead and now double click on this reference to write printer in the code. And that takes me to here in the decompiler output, the reference to write printer. And now, of course, the third step in our process is to interpret. And whenever I identify an interesting Windows API like this, I always want to understand its purpose, what arguments it takes, and what its return value represents. If I look up write printer in Microsoft documentation, I'll see the important parameter is the second one, which is the data actually being sent to a printer. If I now return to the code to see what is being sent to the printer, I can see that it's being stored in RSI. Now, I don't immediately know what content that is, but if I go ahead and single click on RSI to highlight it, and then I scroll up to the top, I'll see that RSI is populated here with the address 140033C80. Now, this is just the address of some data, and I don't know what data that is yet, but I know it's the address of the data that is being sent to the printer. So let me go ahead and name this something meaningful. I'll single click on this data label. I'll then hit N on my keyboard, and I'm going to rename this AS for my initials, followed by data to print. And then I'll click accept. So whatever ends up at that location is exactly what gets sent to the printer. Now, I want to know what's actually there. So let me trace back to where this location is actually populated with data. And I can do that by, again, using cross-references. So I've already single-clicked my newly named label here. And if I look on the bottom left, I'll see that in this case, there are actually quite a few code references. Now, I'm looking for one that actually writes to this variable, not just reads it. And there are a number here, but towards the bottom, I see several referenced in main, which is the function that we were already actually looking at. Now, I could go through these one by one in order to investigate the context of each individual reference, but for the sake of keeping this video at a reasonable length, I'm going to go ahead and jump straight to the middle one here and double click on it. Now, what's interesting with this reference is that nearby we see a reference to the Windows API crypt string to binary A, which, if we look it up, is a Windows API often used to decode base64 encoded content. So the question is, what's this content it's actually decoding? Again, based on reading the documentation, the first argument is a pointer or the address of the string to be decoded. Here in the code, I can see that the first argument is right here, where we see this very long string of characters. And if I double click on it, it takes me so that I can view the entire string where it's located within the file. Now, based upon what we just read about this API, I suspect this is base64 encoded content. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this out. Let me scroll down here until the end. I'm then going to right click, go to copy as. I'm going to choose escaped string and then ASCII escaped string. This basically copies all of the text pretty cleanly. I'm then going to take it over to CyberChef, which I have here on my desktop, right here. Let me double click on the CyberChef to open it up in a browser. I'm then in the input here going to paste that long string I just copied out from Binary Ninja. I'll go over here to operations, and you can see because of how commonly it's used, we have from base64. And then in the bottom right, we have the decoded message. And this turns out to be the plaintext ransom note. And this is the exact text the malware was printing out to every printer it can connect to. And it's also the moment that this sample tells us a little bit about itself. You can see right here that it identifies it as part of the SINOBI group or the SINOBI ransomware operations. And of course, below we have some additional details regarding how to actually make payment. And to close this loop, let me go ahead and now document what I learned by renaming this location within Binary Ninja so that I know exactly what it's referring to. So I'm going to go back up here, and rather than leaving it at this data underscore address generic label, I'll hit N on my keyboard, and I'll replace it with AS, again, for my initials, underscore base64 encoded ransom note, and hit accept. So we are 2 pivots in, and look how far that second one carried us. One jump on an API, and then we just followed the data from the printer API to the buffer, back into the function where it's decoded to the attacker's own ransom note, and even their name. And we still haven't read this binary from top to bottom. We just pivoted based on an interesting import. So we just did that entire investigation by hand, but there is a way to speed this up, and that is by using the Capa tool. Capa is a free standalone tool that specializes in identifying capabilities based on strings, functions, constants, and other code characteristics. I've talked about it in many videos before, so you know that I'm a fan. It not only identifies capabilities, but it gives you the address of each capability. So to run Capa against this sample, let me go ahead and open up the command prompt. And I'll type the path to my Capa binary. I'll then direct it to the location of where I've downloaded the latest Capa rules. I'll specify V for verbose, and then the sys32.exe and hit enter. So lots of capabilities identified here. Some of them will certainly overlap with what we've already discussed. For example, we see right here that it's identified the use of base64 by a Windows API. We did talk about that already. Here we see references to it accepting command line arguments. That was pretty clear also, just based on looking at strings. And because it can group different characteristics together, it can find not only individual APIs and strings, but it can find a pattern of activity as well. For example, one capability it identifies is enumerate files recursively, which makes a lot of sense in the context of how ransomware works, because it's going to iterate over many files on the disk drive and encrypt them. Well, if I go ahead and copy this address right here and then go to Binary Ninja, hit G on my keyboard, and then paste that address and press accept, it takes me to the location of the code that is responsible for iterating over files across the file system. Here, if I scroll down, we can see APIs like find first file. Then it looks like we have another do while loop here. And then towards the end of the do while loop, we have a call to find next file. And in between that, we have many references to interesting strings like encrypting : So this very well may be the loop that is going to iterate over files and actually perform the encryption. We can also see down here references to extensions like .exe, MSI, and DLL, and also Lynx.lynx. This turns out to be the extension it actually adds to the end of encrypted files. So a fair question is, why didn't we just start here with Capa output instead of more manually pivoting based on strings and imports? Well, first, because you took that more manual approach, you actually understand what Capa is telling you and what sort of patterns it's looking for. So you can appreciate what it found, but also go beyond it. For example, Capa doesn't specifically identify the functionality associated with printing a ransom note to actual printers. We did that based on our own pivoting, which is something you need to know how to do. Also, because Capa is often matching based on specific strings and imports, if a sample is obfuscated in some way, which a lot of malware is these days, well, some of these hits may not be present. So you can't expect Capa to tell you the full story. So just to recap what we did, we took a real ransomware sample, and instead of reading it top to bottom, beginning at the entry point, we ran pivot first analysis. We pivoted first on a string, a single suspicious import after that, and finally capabilities identified by Capa. Every one of those pulled us straight to interesting code. We learned this sample terminates processes, it prints its ransom note to every real printer it can reach, and found the code that likely iterates over files for encryption. This is exactly how you triage a sample during real incident response or threat hunting, when someone needs to know what this thing does as soon as possible. And you don't have to spend days reading the code to get some of those answers. If you want to go deeper on this is exactly the kind of work we spent 8 weeks together on in my Reverse Engineering Essential Skills program, and I've put a link to that in the description. So here's my question for you. How do you prefer to begin your code analysis? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how you work. And if you found this useful, please do consider subscribing. It's become quite clear to me that many people watching these videos aren't actually subscribed. It's a small step you can take to support my content. And since we did end on Capa, I'll point you to either here or here, another video on using Capa in coordination with Binary Ninja. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.